Hello, my amazing listeners. Welcome to today's story, a tale of love, betrayal, and the incredible strength it takes to rise from the ashes. Today, we're diving into the journey of Amara, a woman who poured her heart and soul into her family, only to face a heartbreak that would change her life forever. In just 15 seconds, Amara's world shattered. One moment, her life was filled with the warmth of her husband's love, the laughter of her children, and the comforting rhythm of their home. But then, Julius stood before her, his eyes distant, speaking the words that splintered her heart. I need something else, someone else. And in that instant, she felt the life she had built slipping away. The morning sounds in the Monrovia filtered through the small but comfortable house that Amara and Julius had called home for the past decade. The soft chattering of neighbors greeting each other in Liberian English, the distant hum of cars along Tubman Boulevard, and the faint strains of gospel music drifting through the open window marked the beginning of another day. Amara stirred awake, breathing in the familiar warmth of the room, with a faint hope that today would be like the countless days she'd spent by Julius's side, raising their family and building a life together. Amara was a woman in her mid-30s with a quiet grace that often belied her strength. She and Julius had met in college, where they had shared dreams of building a life filled with love, family, and enough success to live comfortably. Julius had studied business, while Amara had devoted herself to culinary arts, hoping one day to open her own restaurant or catering business. Those dreams, however, had taken a back seat as their family grew. Tamba had come along soon after their wedding, followed by Sata a few years later. Amara had chosen to stay home to raise their children, pouring all her energy into her family while Julius advanced in his career. She often told herself that her sacrifices were part of their shared dream, that one day they would enjoy the rewards of their work together. It hadn't always been easy, but Amara believed in her heart that the struggles were worth it. She remembered how they had saved every dollar to buy this modest yet charming house on a quiet street lined with palms. Every corner of it held memories, the laughter of their children, late-night conversations, and whispered dreams of the future. She had woven their love into every space of that home. Recently, though, she had sensed a change in Julius. His laughter was less frequent, his time at home shorter, and his gaze often distant. He no longer lingered at the table, savoring the dishes she had prepared, or stayed up to hear about the children's day, or her stories of neighborhood news. He was distant and distracted, and she couldn't help but feel a knot of worry tightening in her chest. She tried to dismiss it, reminding herself that Julius was a hard-working man with the stress from work. Things will settle soon, she reassured herself, clinging to the comforting familiarity of their routines. This morning, however, that feeling of dread was unshakable. She noticed that Julius was already up, quietly moving about the room as he dressed for work. The morning sun cast a muted glow through the curtains, illuminating the lines of tension on his face. She glanced at the clock. It was earlier than usual for him to be leaving. Maybe he has an important meeting, she thought, but the way he avoided her gaze made her sit up in bed, her heart pounding. Are you all right, Julius? She asked softly, her voice laced with concern. Julius paused, his hands frozen mid-motion as he buttoned his shirt. For a moment, his eyes flickered with something, guilt, perhaps, or hesitation, before he looked away, as if afraid that his gaze might betray him. Amara felt a sudden chill, a tightening in her chest, though she had no idea why. Amara, he finally said, his voice flat, almost mechanical. There's something I need to tell you. She felt her breath catch, her mind racing to understand his tone, the strange emptiness in his voice. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, standing to face him, feeling her heart beat faster with a dread she couldn't quite name. "What's wrong, Julius?" Her voice wavered, laced with both worry and a desperation to believe that whatever he was about to say could be fixed. Julius took a deep breath, steadying himself as though he were preparing for something painful. "I've been thinking about my life, our life," he began, his eyes still not meeting hers. "And I don't think I can do this anymore. I need something different." Amara's mind reeled. The words were too vague, too shocking. Her heart raced as she tried to understand. "What do you mean, Julius? We're a family. What are you saying?" He finally met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw raw emotion, a flicker of regret that quickly vanished. "Amara, I've met someone else. Her name is Kumba. She makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in a long time." His voice cracked slightly, betraying a hint of discomfort, but his eyes remained distant, as though he'd prepared for this moment and wanted to get it over with. Amara's heart plummeted. She felt a hollow ache spreading through her chest, an impossible blend of disbelief, hurt, and fury. She wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand how he could discard 10 years, a home, and 2 children for a fleeting thrill. The man she thought she knew stood before her, a stranger with eyes she no longer recognized. She managed to speak, her voice barely a whisper. "You're leaving me? For a girl?" Julius's jaw tightened, as if bracing himself for an argument. "It's not that simple, Amara. This isn't just about her. It's about me. I need to be happy too. I haven't felt like myself in years." Happiness. The word tasted bitter on her tongue. Hadn't she spent years sacrificing her dreams, her happiness, so that they could be a family, so he could pursue his career? But all she could manage to ask was, "And what about Tamba and Sata? Are you going to leave them too?" Julius's gaze faltered, his expression shadowed with guilt. "I'll still be in their lives, Amara, but Kumba and we want to start fresh. You have to understand." Understand. Amara felt something inside her shatter, the pieces of her world crashing down. She was the one who had held their family together, the one who put her dreams on hold. And now he wanted her to understand as he walked away. She felt weak, as if the very ground beneath her feet was crumbling, her life falling apart at the seams. She didn't even remember when he left. All she knew was the silence, the vast emptiness that filled the house when his footsteps faded. The scent of his cologne lingered in the room, a final mocking reminder of the life they had once shared. Amara sat back on the bed, feeling hollow. She barely noticed the tears streaming down her face, the strangled cries that escaped her throat as the realization sunk in. Julius, the man she had loved, the man she had built her life around, had left her for someone else, a girl barely out of her teens. Her thoughts spiraled as she tried to comprehend what her life would be like now. She couldn't imagine mornings without him, dinners without the quiet moments they used to share. She remembered the gentle way he had once held her hand, the promises they had made. She closed her eyes, feeling a profound emptiness fill her soul, wondering how she would ever put the pieces of her life back together. She sat in silence for what felt like hours, surrounded by the memories of a life that no longer existed. In the stillness of that moment, she understood one painful truth. Everything she had known, everything she had believed in was gone. She was alone. The days after Julius left drifted into each other in a fog of shock and disbelief. Amara would wake each morning to the cold, empty space beside her, the spot where Julius had once slept, leaving a chill in her chest that she couldn't shake. She forced herself through the motions of daily life, making breakfast for Tamba and Sata, getting them ready for school. But every task felt like lifting a weight too heavy to bear. Even her once cozy home felt strange, its walls echoing with the silence left behind by the absence of his presence. At first, she struggled even to eat, the smell of food turning her stomach. She would sit at the kitchen table, staring at the cup of tea cooling in her hands, barely tasting it as she took sips out of habit. When the children weren't around, she felt herself slipping into the depths of despair, consumed by questions she couldn't answer. Was I not enough? She wondered, feeling the bitterness rise in her throat. Did he ever truly love me? Some days, the pain was so heavy that she felt as though she couldn't breathe, like the weight of her heartbreak was pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. One morning, as she sat alone in the quiet kitchen, her mother, Margabesi, appeared at the door. Word had spread quickly through their tight-knit community, and Margabesi had come to check on her daughter, sensing that her once strong child was breaking under the weight of her grief. She took one look at Amara's hollow eyes and thin frame and shook her head, her heart heavy with concern. Amara, she said firmly, taking her daughter's hand and guiding her to sit down. You can't go on like this. You have children who need you. Tamba and Sata are looking to you, even if you don't feel strong right now. Amara looked at her mother, the words catching in her throat. Ma, I don't know how to keep going. Everything I thought I knew is gone. I feel lost. Margabesi's face softened and she squeezed Amara's hand. You are stronger than you know, my child. You have faced difficult times before, and you have survived. You will survive this too, but you have to choose to live again. With her mother's words echoing in her mind, Amara resolved to try, even if the pain was still fresh. At first it was hard, harder than anything she had ever done. Every small task, from brushing her hair to cooking breakfast, felt like an insurmountable effort. But each morning, she forced herself to get out of bed, to dress, and greet Tamba and Sata with a smile, however forced it felt. She began to take slow, deliberate steps, determined to be the mother they deserved, even if her heart felt like it was crumbling. As the days turned into weeks, Amara's friends and neighbors began to notice her struggle and offered their support. Her best friend, Finda, would stop by after work, bringing food and small gifts and telling funny stories to make Amara laugh. One evening, after helping Amara put the children to bed, Finda sat beside her on the couch, her arm around her shoulders. Amara, she said softly, you have people who love you, who care about you. You're not alone in this, even if it feels like it. Amara felt a wave of gratitude, and slowly her spirit began to revive. She realized that life had given her an unexpected freedom. Painful, yes, but filled with possibilities she hadn't seen before. One day, while tidying the house, she found an old recipe book hidden beneath a stack of papers. She ran her fingers over the cover, her heart stirring as she remembered her love for cooking, her dream of sharing her recipes with the community. That afternoon, she decided to make one of her favorite recipes, a traditional Liberian dish called abagba, a cassava-based dish she had perfected over the years. The smell of cassava, peppers, and spices filled the house, a familiar comfort that seemed to wrap around her like a warm embrace. She stood over the stove, stirring and tasting, her senses awakening as the rich, savory aromas filled the air. For the first time in weeks, she felt a small spark of joy. When the dish was ready, she sat down at the kitchen table and took her first bite. The flavors were rich and comforting, and as she ate, she felt a flicker of pride. Cooking had always been her passion, a source of happiness, and she realized that she had lost touch with that part of herself. The food filled her not just physically, but emotionally, reminding her of the strength and joy she still held within. The next day, she tried another recipe, experimenting with spices to create a new twist on an old dish. She brought some of the food to Finda's house, and her friend's face lit up as she took a bite. "Amara, this is incredible," Finda exclaimed. "You could sell this, you know. People would love it." At first, Amara brushed off the idea, but as the days passed, the thought lingered in her mind. She wondered, why not? She had always dreamed of running her own business, and now she had the chance to build something just for herself. She took a leap of faith and posted a few pictures of her dishes on social media, along with a small message offering catering services. To her surprise, the response was immediate. People from the community began reaching out, asking if she could cater for family gatherings, church events, and even small business meetings. With each order she filled, her confidence grew, and the more she cooked, the more she felt her old self returning. Her kitchen became a lively, bustling place, filled with the sound of chopping, stirring, and the rich smells of stews, rice dishes, and freshly baked bread. Amara began involving her children, teaching Tamba and Sata how to prepare ingredients and letting them help her with small tasks. They would sit at the counter, their laughter filling the room, and she felt a sense of joy and healing in these moments with them. The time in the kitchen became a ritual, a new family bond forged out of shared work and laughter. One evening, after a particularly busy day, Amara sat alone in her kitchen, taking in the smells of spices and the faint warmth of the oven. The house felt full again, not of people, but of purpose, of hope. She realized that in building her business, she was not just making a living. She was reclaiming her strength, her joy, and her sense of self. Word about her catering began to spread, and soon her small business was in demand throughout the community. Neighbors and friends would stop by, complimenting her on the dishes they had tasted, telling her how her food had brought them comfort and joy. She felt a quiet pride growing within her, a feeling that she had not just survived, but was thriving. One evening, after putting the children to bed, Amara sat on her porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The air was cool, the sky filled with the deep purples and blues of twilight. As she sat there, a sense of calm washed over her. She had faced heartbreak, struggled through dark days, and found her way to the other side. Amara knew her journey was far from over, but she felt a strength within her that she hadn't known before. She had rebuilt her life, not as part of a couple, but as a woman with her own dreams, her own path, and a heart resilient enough to carry her forward. In the quiet of that evening, she realized that she was not only surviving, she was thriving, and whatever lay ahead, she would face it with courage. For Julius, the first few weeks after he left Amara were a whirlwind of excitement. The thrill of being with Kumba, a young, carefree woman who showered him with admiration, gave him a sense of freedom he hadn't felt in years. Kumba's laughter, her impulsive nature, and her wide-eyed adoration made him feel younger, as if he were living a life filled with adventure and possibility. But as the novelty began to wear off, Julius started to notice small cracks in the life he had chosen. Kumba's carefree lifestyle, which had initially felt like an escape, quickly became draining. She was lively and impulsive, always wanting to go out, filling their evenings with parties and late-night outings. She loved being the center of attention, surrounded by friends and loud music. At first, Julius tried to keep up, enjoying the wildness of her energy, but soon he found himself longing for the calm and quiet of home. He began coming home exhausted, hoping to relax after a long day at work, only to find that Kumba had invited friends over again. Their small apartment was constantly buzzing with people, laughter, and loud conversations. Julius felt like a stranger in his own space, disconnected and out of place in the life he had chosen. Sometimes he would sit on the edge of the bed late at night, feeling a strange hollowness settle in his chest as he stared at the unfamiliar surroundings. He would think about Amara, about the warmth of their home, the way she had created a sanctuary filled with love, laughter, and stability. It was a place that had felt like an anchor, and now, without it, he felt adrift. But it wasn't just Kumba's lifestyle that unsettled him. It was her lack of connection with the things that mattered most to him. She showed little interest in his children, often making excuses to avoid spending time with them. Whenever Julius suggested they spend a weekend together with the Tamba and Sata, Kumba would shrug, claiming she had plans or didn't feel comfortable with children around. On the rare occasions they did meet, she was distant and dismissive, barely acknowledging them. The realization of what he had sacrificed began to creep in, a subtle but persistent ache that he couldn't ignore. He missed the way Tamba would light up when he taught him something new, the way Sata would curl up on his lap with complete trust and affection. These small, quiet moments were absent from his life now, replaced by shallow conversations and fleeting thrills. His children seemed to sense the growing distance too. When he finally arranged a weekend visit, he noticed a change in them, a cautiousness that hadn't been there before. Tamba, once eager to show his father his drawings, now watched him from a distance, his eyes filled with unspoken questions. Sata clung to her brother, her small hand gripping his, as if she were uncertain around her father. As he sat with them in a local park, trying to engage them in conversation, he felt the weight of his choices pressing down on him. "Daddy, why don't you come home anymore?" Tamba asked softly, his innocent gaze piercing through Julius's heart. Julius faltered, scrambling for an answer that would make sense to a child. "Daddy, just need some time, Tamba, but I'll always be here for you and Sata." The answer felt hollow, even to him, and Tamba's downcast eyes told him that deity had done little to comfort him. Sata clung tighter to her brother, looking up at Julius with a quiet, almost resigned expression. The realization hit him hard. In choosing a life without Amara, he had also chosen a life with less of his children. The distance he had created was not just physical, but emotional, and he didn't know if he could ever bridge it. As the days went on, Julius found himself reaching out to mutual friends and family, asking casually about Amara, hoping to hear that she missed him, that maybe she hadn't moved on as completely as he feared. But every story he heard surprised him. People spoke of Amara with admiration, recounting how she had transformed her life, how she had started a successful catering business that had become popular in the community. They told him how she had grown stronger, more confident, how her smile had returned brighter than ever. Each story felt like a punch to the gut. He had left, thinking he would find something better, but Amara was the one who had found happiness and purpose. One evening, sitting alone in the quiet apartment, Julius found himself overwhelmed by memories of their life together. He remembered the way she would laugh at his jokes, the way her cooking filled their home with warmth and comfort, the gentle strength she had always shown, supporting him through every challenge. For the first time, he allowed himself to truly acknowledge the depth of his regret. He missed Amara, not just as the mother of his children, but as his partner, his friend, the woman who had been by his side through everything. He realized that in his quest for freedom, he had sacrificed the love, stability, and joy that had been the foundation of his life. Driven by this regret, Julius decided to visit Amara's home, hoping to see her, to understand if there was any chance for reconciliation. When he arrived, he was greeted by a home that felt both familiar and foreign. Amara's small business was thriving. He noticed a few customers stopping by to pick up orders, chatting warmly with her before leaving with bags of her carefully prepared dishes. The home was filled with a new energy, a sense of purpose and vibrancy that hadn't been there before. When the children saw him, they ran to greet him, their faces lighting up. But he sensed a hesitation, a cautiousness that hadn't been there before. After spending some time with Tamba and Sata, he finally found himself alone with Amara, standing in the kitchen where so many of their shared memories lived. The scent of spices and freshly baked bread filled the air, stirring a wave of nostalgia in him. Julius looked at her, noticing the quiet strength in her eyes, the confidence in her stance. She was different, a woman who had faced heartbreak and emerged stronger for it. He felt a lump form in his throat as he struggled to find the right words. "Amara," he began, his voice thick with emotion. I know I hurt you, and I know I can't erase that. But I want you to know I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I've realized how much I took you for granted and how much I miss you. Is there any chance we could try again?" Amara looked at him with a calm, steady gaze. There was no anger in her eyes, but there was a firmness, a sense of peace that he hadn't seen before. "Julius," she replied, her voice gentle yet resolute. "I've worked hard to rebuild my life. I had to pick up the pieces you left behind and find my way forward. I'm not the same person I was, and I don't think I could go back to the way things were." Her words hit him with a painful clarity. He realized, perhaps for the first time, the extent of the damage he had caused. Amara was no longer the woman who had once been by his side, quietly supporting him. She was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had found her own path without him. Julius nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling in his heart. He had made his choices, and now he had to live with them. "I understand," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Amara, for everything." She nodded, a small, compassionate smile on her face. "I know, and I forgive you, Julius. We'll always be connected because of Tamba and Sata, and I want you to be a part of their lives. But as for us, I think it's best if we move forward separately." They stood in silence for a moment, an unspoken understanding passing between them. There was no anger, no resentment, only a quiet acceptance of the choices they had both made. As Julius left that day, he felt the weight of his regret pressing down on him. He had walked away from a family, a love, and a life that had been filled with meaning, and now he understood what he had truly lost. In his quest for freedom and excitement, he had sacrificed everything that mattered, and there was no going back. Amara felt an unexpected mix of emotions as she watched Julius drive away that afternoon. Part of her wanted to feel triumphant, knowing that he had finally realized the gravity of his actions, but another part of her felt a quiet sadness, a bittersweet ache for the love and memories they had once shared, now tainted by betrayal and loss. She had worked so hard to find herself again, and now here was, asking for a second chance. The thought tugged at her heart, bringing a new level of confusion she hadn't anticipated. In the days that followed, Amara found herself drifting through her routines, lost in thought. She went about her work in the kitchen, preparing orders and taking care of Tamba and Sata. But her mind kept circling back to Julius's words. "Is there any chance we could try again?" he had asked, his voice laced with regret. She had imagined this moment so many times in her darkest days, wishing he would realize what he had lost. But now that it was real, it felt different, heavier, more complicated. One evening, as she was preparing dinner, Tamba looked up from his seat at the table and asked quietly, "Mommy, will Daddy come home someday?" His innocent question caught her off guard, and she paused, the knife poised mid-air as she looked at him. Sata, who had been quietly coloring in her book, glanced up, her eyes wide with anticipation. Amara knelt down beside Tamba, choosing her words carefully. "Daddy loves you both very much," she began softly. "But sometimes adults make choices that change things. Daddy and I want what's best for you, and we're trying to figure that out together. But if Daddy misses us and we miss him, why can't he come back?" Tamba asked, his voice filled with a mix of confusion and hope. Amara felt her heart twist, torn between wanting to ease her children's pain and staying true to the new life she had worked so hard to build. She took a deep breath, choosing honesty. Sometimes, even when people love each other, they grow in different directions. Daddy and I want you both to be happy and safe, and we're still working on what that means for our family. Sata climbed into her lap, wrapping her small arms around Amara's neck. "I just want us to be happy, Mommy, like we used to be." Amara hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of her children's wishes pressing down on her. She wanted them to feel whole, to know they were loved, but she couldn't deny the hesitations gnawing at her. She was no longer the same woman who had once built her world around Julius. She had become someone new, someone stronger, someone who had found her own path. That night, Amara sat alone on her porch, staring out at the quiet street. The memories of her life with Julius replayed in her mind, both the beautiful moments and the painful ones. She remembered the way he used to make her laugh, the way he had been there for her through Tamba's birth, their quiet moments of shared dreams. But she also remembered the devastation of his departure, the feeling of abandonment, and the long, painful road she had traveled to rebuild herself. She questioned if she could truly forget, if forgiveness was enough to erase the scars he had left behind. As she sat there, a new thought began to surface. What would it mean to take him back? To try again? She imagined the potential consequences, the lingering doubts, the fear of being hurt again, the loss of the independence she had fought so hard to achieve. She had come so far, finding strength she never knew she had, and the idea of returning to the life she had left behind felt both comforting and suffocating. In the midst of her reflections, her mother, Ma Gabesi, arrived, as if sensing her daughter's inner turmoil. Amara had confided in her mother the previous evening, sharing her conflicting feelings about Julius's desire to reconcile. Ma Gabesi listened patiently as Amara poured out her heart, voicing her lingering love for Julius, her doubts, and the uncertainty clouding her future. "Amara," Ma Gabesi began gently, her voice full of wisdom. "You have come a long way. You've built a life for yourself, a life that is yours alone. Tamba and Sata will grow up seeing a strong mother, a woman who knows her worth. Don't let anyone, not even Julius, take that from you." Amara looked at her mother, her mind racing. "But Ma, the children miss him. They miss us together. I don't want them to feel like their family is broken." Magbesi nodded thoughtfully, reaching over to take Amara's hand. "The children need their father, yes, but they also need a mother who is happy and whole, a mother who knows herself and stands strong. If you decide to forgive him, do it because you truly want to, not because you feel you have to. Her mother's words lingered in Amara's mind, bringing her a small measure of clarity. She realized that, whatever her decision, it had to come from a place of love for herself and her children, not out of guilt or fear. She didn't want to live a life where her self-worth was tied to another person's approval. She had worked too hard to rebuild herself, and she didn't want to lose that newfound strength. The following week, she and Julius met again, this time in a quiet park where they had often brought the children on weekends. She watched him as he approached, noticing the lines of regret etched deeply into his face. She felt an odd sense of calm as she realized her decision was close and that she had the strength to choose what felt right for her. Julius sat beside her, his gaze filled with a mixture of hope and sorrow. "Amara," he began, his voice tentative, "I know I don't deserve it, but I still want us to try again. I miss you. I miss what we had." Amara looked at him, her gaze steady and calm. "Julius, I loved you deeply. I gave everything I had to us, but when you left, I had to rebuild my life from scratch. I had to find my own way without you, and I did. I found a happiness and strength that I didn't know I had." She paused, choosing her words carefully, allowing herself to feel the weight of what she was about to say. "I care about you, and I'll always respect the time we shared. But I've realized that I'm happier, stronger, and more at peace without you. I don't want to go back to the way things were." Julius's face fell, and he looked down, nodding slowly as he absorbed her words. She could see the regret in his eyes, the sadness that he had finally come to terms with. "I understand," he whispered, his voice heavy with sorrow. "I've made mistakes I can't undo. I just hope you find happiness, Amara. You deserve that." Amara gave him a small, compassionate smile. "Thank you, Julius, and I hope you find your path forward too. We'll always be connected because of Tamba and Sata, and I want them to have a relationship with you. But as for us, I think it's best if we move forward separately." They sat together in silence, an unspoken understanding passing between them. There was no anger, no resentment, only a quiet acceptance of the choices they had made. For Amara, it felt like closure, the ending of a chapter that had once defined her life. When she returned home, she sat with her children, gathering them close. "Tamba Sata," she began softly, her voice steady. "I want you to know that Daddy and I both love you very much. No matter what, we will always be a family. We might look a little different now, but we're still together in our hearts." The children listened, their faces solemn but accepting. Tamba looked up at her, his young eyes full of understanding beyond his years. "So, Daddy's not coming home, but we can still see him, right?" Amara nodded, hugging them tightly. "Yes, my love. Daddy will always be a part of your lives. We'll find ways to be together and make sure you feel safe and loved." That night, Amara sat alone on her porch, looking up at the stars. She felt a deep sense of peace settle over her, a feeling she hadn't known in years. She had faced her past, made her choice, and found the courage to move forward on her own terms. She knew her journey was far from over, but she was ready for whatever lay ahead, confident in the strength she had found within herself. And that, dear listeners, brings us to the end of Amara's journey. From the depths of heartbreak to the strength of independence, Amara's story reminds us that sometimes the most painful endings lead us to our truest beginnings. She faced betrayal and loss, yet in rebuilding herself, she found a resilience she didn't know she had. She learned to embrace her own worth and her own happiness, and to make choices that honor the person she's become. Amara's story is one of courage, a powerful reminder that even when life breaks us, we have the strength to rise again. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I hope Amara's story has inspired you as much as it has touched me. Remember, no matter where you are on your own path, you carry within you the strength to rebuild and to thrive. Until next time, take care and keep rising.